The world is watching as Russia's invasion in Ukraine intensifies, and major global economies are responding with another set of sanctions. Jeffrey Edmonds, CNA Corporation senior research scientist, joins us now for more on the conflict. Jeffrey, thanks for your time this afternoon. This afternoon, Bloomberg reported that the U.S. is set to place sanctions specifically on Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm wondering, what message does this send, and what's the significance of this particular action that's set to come from the U.S.?
I think in some ways it labels him as a pariah. I don't think that, he treats the entire Russian economy as his own bank. And so I don't think they're actually going to change his behavior. And I don't think he's going to be surprised by it. But the mere fact that he's being personally sanctioned is just a mark against him.
And when we think about the sanctions that could potentially be coming in the future from the U.S., the EU, and the UK, and other major economies, are any sanctions, do you think, really enough to deter Vladimir Putin and Russia from this invasion that we're seeing? Is this really going to make an impact when we think about the potential courses of action?
I don't think it will, for a couple of reasons. First, the whole Ukraine issue is core and existential to him, and I just don't think he's willing to give that up. Second, I also think that the Russian leadership has an overly optimistic view of their economy. The Russian economy is generally a little bit better than people think it is, but that doesn't mean it's good. It's on more of a war footing with a large reserve. Obviously, it's still dependent on natural resources, but I think they have a little more optimism than I think is warranted, given the types of sanctions, dropping banks, perhaps going after microelectronics. This is going to have a really deleterious effect on the Russian economy in the long term.
And picking up on that point, Russia really has been de-dollarizing itself for quite some time now and building its reserves of gold to reduce its dependence on U.S. dollars and other global currencies. I'm wondering, how significant is that to this moment now, and how effectively will Russia potentially be able to avert financial system destruction and deterioration due to the sanctions that are now coming down on the country?
So I think in the near term, they do have enough. Their economy is strong enough. The military is strong enough that they can sustain this for quite some time. I don't think, on the policy side, I don't think we're trying to destroy their economy. I think there's a worry there that if let's say you create a run on the banks or mass panic in Moscow, then it suddenly becomes an existential problem for the leadership, and they might escalate by widening the conflict and kind of calling us out. And so I think we're trying to, put real big, a lot of pressure on them. And that's what these sanctions are doing. But at the same time, I think we're also trying to not absolutely drop their economy.
And when we think about where we could be heading here, today we've been hearing some mixed reports about whether Russia might in fact be open to negotiations and whether Ukraine might be open to negotiations. China's foreign ministry said Putin told Xi Jinping that Russia is willing to hold high-level talks with Ukraine. And a Kremlin spokesperson also said Russia was prepared to send a delegation to Belarus for talks with Ukraine. Now, recognizing that this has been a fast-developing situation and Putin's intentions have been difficult to really understand, how likely do you think it is that these talks do happen in any form?
I'm not very optimistic that they will, one, occur, and two, I'm very, very pessimistic that they would actually mount anything. And the Russian leadership has called Zelensky and others, neo-Nazis and drug users that have to go. And so from the Russian perspective, any negotiation is going to be a negotiated surrender, is what they're going to be looking for from the Ukrainian leadership. And I don't think the leadership in Ukraine is really at that point at all. In fact, I think they're quite emboldened by the fact they've put up more of a resistance than the Russians had anticipated, and they've got so much international support. So I really don't see the negotiations going anywhere.
And President Joe Biden said during his public remarks yesterday that Putin has much larger ambitions in Ukraine, and that Putin really does want to reestablish the former Soviet Union. Do you think we'll see a Russian attack potentially on a NATO ally?
I don't. I don't think Russia wants this to expand beyond Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be enough of a drain on its military resources. The scenario in which I think that could happen is, like I said earlier, if we did something where that made the Russian leadership fear their actual survival, then I would think that they might reach out and attack a NATO ally to trigger an Article 5 to kind of make the argument, hey guys, if you really want to go down this route, I'm going to go down it pretty hard. So I think that's really the only scenario. I guess another scenario could be unintended spillover. You've got, adversarial armies, around the other side of borders like Poland and others. And so you could have some kind of inadvertent escalation there that could spiral out of control and cause this conflict to widen.
And at the civilian level, thousands have been fleeing from Ukraine, already moving into NATO countries to the west. How do you think a major migrant crisis could impact Europe and other countries in the wake of this?
I mean, I think we've seen, like in the past, it just really becomes a human tragedy, right? And Europe is already suffering under, like you said, already has a migration crisis, and this is only going to make that worse. So, I mean, hopefully, I mean, I know a lot of Ukrainians are staying in place, but either way, this is just, it's horrible for Ukrainian citizens. It actually doesn't support even Russian goals in the long run if they want to actually try to win over the population, and it becomes more of a burden for Europe.
And in absence of military intervention from the US or NATO, which Biden has, of course, said is not going to be happening at this point, do you think Ukraine is fighting a losing battle here? Is Russia ultimately likely to overtake the country at this point?
I think that is probably the case, more probable than not. The Ukrainians are putting up quite a fight, a bigger fight than I think the Russians anticipated. I think the Russians made a couple operational mistakes early on. I mean, it's really hard to say right now. I mean, we're only 48 hours in. Anything could happen. Everything's very contingent. But the Russian military is quite large, and Russia's only committed a fraction of what it has on the border. And so long term, I don't think this looks good for the Ukrainian military. I guess the big question then is, does this move into Kyiv and you have urban fighting, which could really drag out? Are there going to be partisan movements throughout the country that are targeting Russian logistics and stuff like that? So even if the Ukrainian military itself kind of stops functioning as a large military, you could still have the conflict dragging out for quite some time.
We appreciate your insight on this important topic this afternoon. Jeffrey Edmonds, CNA Corporation Senior Research Scientist, thank you.